Dr. Nipper. Where is Dr.? There he is, right there. All right, can everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so everybody's here, present. Where's the roll call? I need to make an announcement that we had an executive session held prior to this meeting to discuss personnel. And we're going to move on to public comment. All right, so first one up, Ms. Clifton, come on up. I'm going to say this now so that we don't have to say it each time. Please state your name, township, 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Jeanette Clifton, Lower Pottsgrove. Okay. I want the board to remember the current universal masking policy is unconstitutional according to the Supreme Court, and you guys had promised to follow that. Doesn't seem like you are. The school and some of the experts are not following the science and withholding data. Read the New York Times article that states the CDC has purposely suppressed information from the public. It has also been difficult to find CDC data on the proportion of children hospitalized for COVID who have other medical conditions. And this is from Dr. Yvonne Maldonado, chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Infectious Diseases. The cure is worse than the disease for healthy young children. Myocarditis has been found in many teenagers after the COVID shot. This is unacceptable to me. The survival rates are extremely high. The comparison of survival rates versus death rates, and then compared to other diseases, has not been addressed. Another need to be addressed is stop focusing on just cases. Actually read the CDC charts on their website. And this so-called vaccine doesn't fit the description of a vaccine. A vaccine is a substance containing a harmless form of the germs that cause a particular disease. It is given to people usually by injection to prevent them from getting that disease. It does not prevent the disease, it just lessens the severity in the elderly and immune compromised. Again, the CDC states breakthrough infections commonly occur. It means you can still get it. And I feel that the school administration has become a bit tyrannical.
10 seconds.
Unjust and oppressive governmental power. Students, especially special needs, have the right to have supports in schools. The parents have the right to pick whom they choose, and they have not have the school or government choose for them. There's a teacher shortage because of the current policy.
Ms. Clifton, your time is up.
And shutdowns. An example is COVID learning loss.
Thank you. Mr. Corman? And I just want to clarify, we have 2 topics here. I just want to make sure the second one's for the second topic, correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
Andrew Corman, Upper Pottsgrove Township. From the ebook, Proof That Face Masks Do More Harm Than Good. You each have a copy of it. Face masks do more harm than good, and being forced to wear a form of oppression designed to have adverse physical, psychological effects upon the wearer, rather than having any protective value. The most unconscionable acts in human history were conducted by those just following orders. Tomorrow in Bucks County,
put it up, put the mask up, please.
Seriously, you're not going to catch the virus from me. I am naturally immune. Tomorrow in Bucks County, over 90% of students and staff will have mask choice. SARS-CoV-2 is the smartest virus ever because here in Montgomery County, over 90% of students do not have choice. From Zuby Music, the past 2 years have been the equivalent of burning down an entire house to kill a rat, and the rat is still alive. When COVID-19 hoax began, authorities around the world announced that mask wearing was pointless, and it is widely agreed that by experts that they could probably do more harm than good. The COVID-19 infection is merely a standard flu heavily marketed for specific purposes. The lockdowns, social distancing, masks, and vaccines were never necessary, and it is not difficult to prove these measures have done infinitely more harm than good. From the New England Journal of Medicine, we know that wearing a mask outside healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. I'm going to skip to the good part. It was proved in 1920 that cloth masks failed to impede or stop flu virus transmissions. It was concluded that the number of layers of fabric required to prevent pathogens penetration
seconds.
would require a suffocating number of layers and could not be used. Finally, last one. The CIA uses
Time is
lockdowns,
up.
isolation, and face masks for torture. You're abusing our children. End it.
Thank you. Mr. DiTillo, come on up.
My name is Dustin DiTillo, Lower Pottsgrove. And I can't believe I'm still speaking to you guys about this. Your guys' weird holdout and resistance in society is just confusing anymore. Like, what is it? We have to start, some of us have to start assuming that you guys have ulterior motives. And we didn't have to wear a mask to speak until you got that seat, Al. Like, you made this little special rule on your own to wear a mask when we speak, but whatever. There's no compromise. Like, where's the compromise? My kid's been following your stupid little mask rule this whole time. You're lucky that we don't tell them to come every day and give resistance. But they don't, because they're good kids and they listen to authority. That's what we've trained them to do. I can't even get my senior here to speak because she gets nasty messages. Pictures about me speaking here. So she's afraid to come here and speak her mind. But you like that, Al. You wanted that, man. You guys like this division. I question, I seriously, these days that come up, I was off today, so I got to spend the day with my little one. I think about, what I'm going to say, and it's like, I'm freaking embarrassed that I served in the Marine Corps, and I can't even come here and get my freaking kids unmasked. I fought against people way tougher than you, way tougher than you guys. And I could beat that. I mean, I can't figure a way to beat you guys. I mean, that's really good. Bravo. I mean, bravo. You guys have continued to strip me of my personal choice and my rights. How many bodies you guys cleaned up in combat? Anybody? I cleaned up a few. I thought I could come back here to my country and have my personal rights, but I guess I don't. COVID, forget about COVID, guys. You guys are so narrow-minded. You forgot about all the other effects to children.
10 seconds.
You don't have any psychologists here. You don't have any psychiatrists here. It's just narrow-minded with COVID. And stop using community cases. It's a freaking ridiculous metric. It's the only metric you guys use. Stop with everything.
Thank you. Ms. Kopuk, come on up.
Katie Copa, Upper Pottsgrove. Across the country, we're starting to see more and more signs of normalcy. Last week, we witnessed over 70,000 people crowded into an indoor stadium with few to any masks in sight. Normal. I don't have any issues with that. Here's what I do have an issue with that. There remains one subset of our population in the United States that are expected to live by a much stricter set of rules. That subset just so happens to be the only group that's incapable of putting up a fight: kids. For a very long time as a parent, I've been in the unenviable position of having to explain to my kids why it is that normal seems to be everywhere else except their schools. Now that position's even harder because their cousins who live in a neighboring school district now have the option of not wearing a mask to school. And yes, they live in Montgomery County, Souderton School District. Neighboring Bucks County, as of today, has 85 to 90% of their schools masks optional. I sent this board and superintendent last night a study done of mitigation efforts between Montgomery and Bucks County. The study shows that COVID rates are identical. Again, what are we doing? And why are we doing it? In the beginning of the year, this district was prepared to go mask optional, still following Montgomery County guidelines because they are that. They are guidelines. They are not mandates. Guidelines don't equal mandates. Recommend does not equal require. Why are we mandating masks when Montgomery County doesn't? The state of Pennsylvania was slapped because they tried. Why are we?
Thank you. Ms. Saylor.
Lisa Saylor, Upper Pottsgrove Township. Parents are able to typically make the best choices for our children, and we have their best interests in mind, which I thought the school board should have as well, but here we are. Parents know their children the best, and my child is different now than she was on March 13th, 2020. My daughter was smart, driven, confident, and outgoing. Now, 23 months later, she is anxious, she dislikes school, and she's depressed. She's forced to wear a mask in school, and people, all of us, probably don't wear a mask 8 hours a day, every day while you're at work. She sits with bacteria and viruses on her face all day, and on days like today, they have indoor recess. So there's no mask break, except for when they're eating. I never thought I'd have to come to the school board meeting to fight for my children to breathe fresh air. I can guarantee that no student is able to wear a mask correctly. As a registered nurse of 18 years, I've been trained to wear a mask correctly. What should happen here is if a parent is concerned that their child is going to get sick, then maybe they should be the ones to wear a mask. We should mask the sick, the vulnerable, not the healthy. My choice for my children would be to not wear a mask. Stop being hypocritical and stand up for our children. Watching the Montgomery County Commissioners meeting last week was so discouraging. There's so much disrespect, and I'm so glad that the behavior witnessed there and here in these meetings is how we are teaching our kids it's okay to act, that other people's opinions don't matter, and that the behavior is acceptable as long as you're in the front of the room.
Thank you. Ava, you go ahead.
My name is Ava Saylor. I am in 3rd grade at Lower Pottsgrove Elementary School. I once again am coming back up to speak to the board today. I did not get to finish the last few lines of what I wanted to say last time. I feel my parents have my best interest in mind, and I am comfortable with them making decisions for me. They even involve me in decisions that is appropriate. I just want the option to have to wear a mask. I am not asking for you to say masks aren't allowed. I'm asking for the freedom of choice to choose something that I want and that my family feels is right for me. Everyone deserves their choice in this matter, and yet we are not allowed to have one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Gleason.
Good evening. It's Mike Gleason from Upper Pottsgrove Township. I wanted to bring your attention to an email I sent earlier today regarding the moderate levels. I believe Dr. Finity is going to talk later on that part of the health and safety plan to make mask optional is the townships need to get to moderate levels. And the numbers that they're quoting from the county are prorated or rationalized per 100,000. That's a lot of people. So you have to be at 10 to 50 per 100,000. Our townships are small. In the email, I told you Upper Pottsgrove has less than 6,000 people in it. To get down to the moderate level, you have to completely eradicate the virus in Upper Pottsgrove. You have to be at 0. In West Pottsgrove, of a population less than 4,000 people, you also have to be at 0. You have to eradicate COVID in 2 of our 3 townships in order for us to get rid of masks or make them optional. In Lower, having 12,000 people, you can have 1. So 1 person in our 3 townships get COVID, we still have to wear a mask. That doesn't make any sense to me. Make them optional. If you want to, if parents want to, if teachers want to, you can wear a mask. Like people were saying, they even recommended wear 2 masks. Wear your COVID or your N95 mask and wear your decorative cloth mask over top of it. Why are we making healthy kids wear masks? Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Brianna, because you have a different topic, do we have anybody online that wants to speak about the health and safety? All right, Ms. Robinson, come on up. Now, I do have one question for you, right? Because you put on here PGEA. Are you here to represent the PGTEA representation or yourself? Because we cannot negotiate here, but if you're representing yourself, you're more than welcome to speak.
I'm representing myself.
Then go ahead.
Okay. I was here last time, and I'm speaking about the same thing tonight because I did see that it's on the agenda to be voted on. So I'm here once again to ask that the one...
Ms. Robinson, can you state your name and your...
Sure.
Thank you.
It's Brianna Robinson, Lower Pottsgrove Township, also a teacher at Rocks. Okay. I am here once again to ask that the $1.2 million not be transferred into the Capital Reserve Fund. We feel that this is premature to move funding streams into inaccessible capital reserve funds or similar accounts at this time. As I stated at the previous meeting, last year PGSD saw a 10% increase in state funding, and on February 8th, 2022, Governor Wolf again proposed increasing in state funding. With an infusion of federal and state aid specifically directed to education, lower than anticipated retirement costs, and an uptick in turnover at Pottsgrove, any move by the district to send funds to inaccessible accounts, such as capital projects, would limit the district's flexibility to handle a host of uncertain costs coming its way, up to and including bargaining a successor contract. This movement of funds would not give the school district much room to negotiate the expiring contract, which could result in having to raise taxes by the Act 1 index, putting unnecessary stress on our district's families. I'm aware that this is an agenda item tonight, and I'm asking that we pause on this transfer at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else that wants to come up? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you and good evening. Tonight I'd like to use my report time to discuss the health and safety plan. In our action items education, we are recommending approval of actually 2 changes to the health and safety plan to remove the limitation on visitors in our school. Principals will have the flexibility to admit visitors according to our published visitor and volunteer procedures. Additionally, as shown on our COVID dashboard, well, before I move on, actually, I left this other part out. In the health and safety plan that you'll vote on later, there's also a change to apply the same standard that we've been applying to athletics for the whole year to our student performers in our musicals. And that is when students are actively engaged in a high exertion activity, that they be allowed the option to unmask. How it works, if you've been to any of our athletic competitions, students on the court or on the mat are unmasked. Students not actively engaged are masked, and all adults would be masked. So that is also an element that's in our plan later this evening. Additionally, as shown on our COVID dashboard, the level of community transmission and COVID cases in our district have declined significantly in the past 3 weeks. The data was just published this afternoon, and we are now in the substantial category. Our plan calls for a universal mask mandate while we're in higher substantial. If this trend continues, the level of community transmission may fall below the 50 cases per 100,000 threshold for the moderate case. At 2 consecutive weeks in moderate or below, mask would be optional for all students, staff, and visitors. That's how our current plan reads. Area districts experiencing similar decreases, and they are, have taken a variety of different approaches. Some districts have opted to remain consistent with the Montgomery County Office of Public Health guidance, and that's exactly what we have right now. Others have opted to transition to mask optional at substantial, and some districts have selected a date to end universal masking regardless of level of community transmission. Locally, one district and at least 2 others statewide have to maintain universal masking based on an American with Disabilities Act lawsuit. So they have lost local control of their health and safety plan. Those are the facts as we see it. And I thought I'd use my report tonight to facilitate a discussion among board members on anything regard to our health and safety plan. So thank you.
Does the board want to discuss it now or wait until 7.5 when we're
I
voting?
just have a quick question.
Yes.
My question would be, Dr. Finnerty, you're saying that the health and safety plan to remove limitations on visitors in our school, is this going to help our special ed kids to have outside resources to come in and assist them?
Not necessarily special ed kids, but anybody that had wraparound services that was previously not allowed would now be allowed to apply and be admitted to our schools.
I'm going to open it back up. Do you guys want to discuss it now or 7.5? Give me head nods which way you want to go. All right, we're going to wait until 7.5 then, because then we have to vote on it and we'll change however the motion goes then. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be personnel, 5.1. And then someone's going to combine it.
Action items, 5.1, retirement. The recommended action to approve the staff retirement of Mr. Gary Durenzo, Director of Community Relations and Co-Curricular Programs, effective September 12th, 2022.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to accept the resignation of Gary Durenzo, but not until September 12th, so everybody realizes that. All right. Anybody have any comments or questions?
I do, sir. I want to publicly thank Mr. Durenzo. When I first came on board, meeting with stakeholders and with the board, and wanting to get to know the Pottsgrove community. I'm like, who do I have to talk to? And without fail, it was Mr. Pottsgrove, Mr. Durenzo. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being there, for agreeing to stay on, and for lending your talents. And between now and the end of September, we're going to work real hard and get an internship program up and some community service opportunities up and running, and that's going to be a fantastic addition to your legacy. So thank you, sir.
Well, Gary, here we are. I actually am not really going to approve this because I don't think you should go. Only kidding. But there is no better man that I have ever met, other than my Grimmy, than Gary. Gary has been here forever, has helped everybody, gets involved, gives advice, no judgment. And these are big shoes we're going to have to fill. So please promise me you'll stay around, come to our events, because I'll miss you. And I just wish you, Ginger, and your family the best. I really do.
Mr. Durenzo, thank you for being around probably 6 out of 8 decades that Pottsgrove's been around. I got to know you in the early 90s, mid-90s with baseball. You allowed me to coach football. You allowed me to coach baseball. You've always were there, stood behind your coaches, stood behind the right things to do to make kids better students, better people, not just a better athlete. And my boy was here, Christopher, and I just want to say thank you for everything you've done. It's a tough pill to swallow with you heading out, so thank you for everything. And I know I'll see you out there and maybe have a beverage.
Gary has, I don't know, you're just the most passionate man I know about Pottsgrove, so thank you for everything.
I'll go. I just can't think of anyone who represented Pottsgrove better than Gary. And I have to say, we were very lucky when he came over here from Pottstown, because he could be retiring from Pottstown now instead of Pottsgrove, and we would have lost all that time. So thank you, Gary, for everything. You were always the one that I could call or text if I had a question, and you always responded right away, and you always have a smile on your face and a funny story to tell, and I wish you the best.
And I get to be last. Gary, you're probably the biggest shoes we're going to have to fill, bearing a superintendent. Without question, I don't think my wife and I would even have attempted to stay with the Booster Club and anything without you and your support and everything you are to the district. There is absolutely no way we could have done anything that we even tried to do without your support and help. What you've done for the district will probably never be understood by most people. Everybody will sit there and say, Mr. Pottsgrove and such like that, but not many people will truly understand how much of an impact you had to all the children that actually started from kindergarten and actually graduate. They may not realize what you actually have, how much support you have actually created for them, and they may not see that, directly, but it's there, and it's just an amazing thing. I wish you the best on your next endeavor, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do there. So thank you. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 5.2.
I'd like to combine 5.2, skip over 5.3, and then combine 5.4 and 5.10. So we're going to pull out, we're going to 5.2, 5.4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay, combined.
Yes.
I have a motion and a second to approve 5.2, 5.4 through 5.10. Anybody have any questions on those items?
I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the, 5.10 supplemental staff. At the very bottom, it says non-athletic. Can somebody explain what the Dome Club group is? Doom Dome. What is it? Doom Dome. Can somebody explain that to me? It sounded so cool.
That's lower. Well, actually, I don't know if they do.
Well, that's always fun to see the kids having a good time, so thank you for that. It's crazy.
You could probably feed the Eastern Seaboard off the energy from the kids.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 5.3.
Item 5.3 is administrative appointments. We have two administrative appointments this evening. One is a familiar face and one is a brand new face. On the agenda, we have the appointment of Jeff Madden as an interim administrator for Pottsgrove High School to support our students and staff until we get our new high school principal on board. Which leads me to the new person in the room. We are very excited to bring for your vote and approval Dr. Jeff Smith as our next high school principal. Dr. Smith was the successful candidate through 3 rounds. He interviewed with 46 Pottsgrove administrators, teachers, staff, parents, and students, and was the unanimous choice. And we are very proud to present him to you this evening, and very proud for him to, pending your vote, join our team.
I need a second. I have a motion and a second to approve the 5.3 administration. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Welcome aboard.
Give me 1 second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Welcome aboard. .1, please.
Before we move on, Dr. Smith, do you have anyone here with you this evening?
Thank you very much. There's so many people to thank. Grateful for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to everything it means and honors to be a Pottsgrove Falcon. I have my amazing wife, Mrs. Rebecca Smith, and she joined me today, and she's been along with me for this journey, and it's been phenomenal to have this kind of support. It allows me to to just enjoy my career, enjoy my children, and we can enjoy each other. So thank you so much for the opportunity. This is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on to action items business 6.1. I need a motion. Make a motion to improve
Can I,
6.1 and 6.2. And then
Make a
I'll
motion to combine 6.1 and 6.2?
Second.
motion for to combine 6.1 and 6.2. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 6.3.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 6.3, transfer to the capital reserve fund.
I have a motion and a second to approve the transfer of to capital reserve funds, our $1.2 million we have currently in the budget. Do I have any questions or comments? All right, then I'm going to answer the question. Ron, if we do not move this $1.2 million, how would that affect us?
If the $1.2 million is not transferred to the capital reserve, it stays in the general fund. That causes the unassigned fund balance to exceed the 8% rule in public school code. Doesn't mean much, it just prevents you from raising any tax rate, if need be, if the money stays in the general fund.
So to go back to the question we had earlier about possibly not removing the money into capital reserves prior, the issue we may have would be we would not have an opportunity to raise taxes to possibly pay for anything that may come later on down the road if necessary.
That is correct.
Does anybody have any questions about removing the money to the capital reserves? Hearing none. All those in favor?
I do have one quick question. Can it be moved to something that's accessible rather than the reserve?
The only other fund that you could probably transfer it to is our internal service fund, which houses the medical money to pay for our premiums. The other funds that we have is our food service fund. You can't transfer it to that. We can create a debt service fund to pay for a future debt payment, but again, you have to transfer it out of the general fund so you can have the ability to raise taxes.
And Mr. Lincoln, the importance of funding our capital reserves goes back to the 10-year plan that you and Mr. Cardwell
That is
presented
correct.
to the facility operations.
Back in the beginning of January, it presented a $53.5 million estimated price tag to address all the building's needs within the next 10 years. And with the capital reserve fund to about almost $4 million, we have a long way to go to reach our board's goal of 75% of the capital plan.
Hearing no more questions, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
I'd like
Move
to
on.
make a
Go ahead.
motion under education to approve 7.1 through 7.4.
Need a second. I have a motion and a second to approve 7.1 through 7.4. Do anybody have any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 7.5, here we go, guys. I need someone to make a motion first.
I'll make the motion that we approve 7.5.
I have a motion and a second, so we're going to open it up for discussion. Go ahead.
I do have a question for, going with the simpler one, on the anaerobic activities, including athletics and musical performances. So just to confirm, this is dealing with the musical, so this would not include choral performances, correct?
So this is specifically to high exertion after-school activities, and we do specifically reference athletics and musical performances.
Any other comments, questions?
Well, I just go back to, we're making another exception. Except these folks, except athletics, except musical. It seems like we're making more exceptions when we should just maybe take a leap of faith. You know, I want to go out on a limb and say we should be doing masks recommended, but not mandatory. So we keep making an exception. When's the exception going to come for that young lady there that just spoke to us? When's the exception going to come for the other young man in the audience also? When's it going to come? So I'm tired of exceptions. I just say we need to be leaders. Somebody needs to lead. And I think it's time for us as a school district to start leading instead of following and listening and waiting for other districts and people that we don't even know out there. I looked up a lot of things on Montgomery County Health today because I knew what was happening tonight, and I've done it before, but statistics right from the Montgomery County Department of Health. Daily new cases in Montgomery County for February 17th and 18th, last Thursday and Friday. So we have 950,000 people, 950,000 people in Montgomery County. You know how many new cases we had in Montgomery County those 2 days? Wild guess. Somebody give me a wild guess. 10. We had 212. 212 out of 950,000 people. I have no clue, but daily new cases at Montgomery County Correctional Facility 4, daily cases, new cases in long-term care facilities 6, and those 10, the 6 and the 4, are included in the 212. This is right off the website of Montgomery County Department of Health. Pull out my other little cheat sheet. Once again, if we go back 14 days, 14-day average positivity rate, 9.67 for Montgomery County, 9.67. That's right off of their website. We are now back to daily positivity rate, 9.19%. It's time that we give people a chance here. We're not stopping anybody from wearing a mask. Not stopping anybody from wearing a mask. But it's time to give people and parents the right choice. We're giving it to the music people, we're giving it to the wrestlers, we're giving it to, you name it, high activity. They take their masks off to eat lunch here and there. It's time, folks. It's time to get back to somewhat normalcy. And I'd rather be a leader. We always can go back to it if we have to, but it's time to recommend that we wear a mask, but not necessarily mandate that they wear a mask.
There is
Go
a
ahead.
flaw in the analysis, and I've been reluctant to point this out because as a professional engineer, I am not an epidemiologist. I have written over 20 papers in computer simulation, and I have some expertise in modeling. All our data is hung on this positivity number. And we're using that positivity number is a representative of the severity of the pandemic on the community. The problem with that analysis is that when the pandemic started, when we had what is now called the Alpha variant, that was probably a measure of the severity of the illness at that time. We are now on the Omicron variant, which is clearly less severe. So a severity of 50 under Alpha would be much more severe than a severity of 50 under Omicron. Now, that means that the basic number we're hanging our hat on is a questionable measure of the risk to the community. And I've been reluctant to raise the issue. Maybe I should have followed this up with a memo so that you guys could figure out what an alternative number would be that reflects the risk to the community. Now, there's another point about the risk to the community that many of you have mentioned, and I thank you, Joe. You kicked my butt enough so I finally got off my rear end and did something. But here's the point. I have 2 kids. My son and his wife had a child just before the pandemic struck. That pandemic is that kid is 2.5 years old. He has not had a shot. They are terrified, obviously, of what would happen if that kid got exposed, because the level of risk to my grandson is quite severe because he hasn't had any shots. My daughter, who lives in New York, has 3 kids, the youngest of which is 6. They've had their shots, they've had their boosters, and she's going to a school, the kids are going to a school without masks. The risk to them is very different than the risk to my son, my grandson Teddy in Coopersburg. So we are not looking just at the risk to the community, we need to look at the risks to individual families. Some families, like my son, definitely want masks. Some families, like my daughter, don't need them. So the point is, there's a technical point here about using this pandemic number as a rigid number, because it's not a measure of what we're interested in, which is the risk to the community. And also, we're not interested in the risks to the community, we're interested in the risks to individuals. And some individuals, like my son, have a great risk. Other individuals, like my daughter, don't have a great risk. So I think, Joe, your point is well taken. We need to wrap this thing up in a reasonable way, and if the next variant comes along, and I forget my Greek alphabet, I don't know what comes after Omicron, but eventually Omega, but, you know, the next variant is severe, we may have to go back and wear masks. But if the next variant is less severe, maybe 50 is too high a number. And the gentleman who pointed out the statistics of small numbers, you were absolutely correct in your statement, both technically and what it means to us. If you set the criteria at some level, it might be mathematically almost impossible to achieve it. So, sorry I sat on my rear end so long, but I think, number one, this is a valid point which we need to forward to Montgomery County to look at a measure that measures the risk to the community and not an arbitrary number that may be obsolete.
Do I have another, or any other comments?
I do. And I'm going to ask that people not applaud, because for me, this is not about sides, and it's not about who can clap loudest or who can call others the biggest names or say we're not leaders or that we are leaders. I'm asking you to hold your applause. I struggle with this. My family members have been in the hospital because of COVID. However, we're vaccinated. Vaccinations are highly available right now. Good masks are highly available right now. And they're all choices. I live my life mask optional, as does my family, except when I'm required to do it because I'm a rule follower. I continue to respect the Department of Health. I hear people questioning the numbers. There's a lot of data out there. I read as much as I can. It's very difficult for me to know what to believe. What I don't believe is people who yell at me because I turn off listening to them. I don't believe people who call me names. I don't believe people who are insulting to others. I try not to live my life that way. I am ready to suggest that we set a date to go mask optional. I'm not sure what that date should be. It's a week or 2 weeks at the most out, with the condition that if things remain as they are with the data or continue to improve, which I would hope, that we move forward with that recommendation. But, you know, Joe, when you talk about leadership, a leadership is a person who stands for what they believe. So just because an individual doesn't stand for what I believe doesn't make them not a leader, which is to say, if you're not like me, you're not good enough.
Well, I wasn't
Wait, let me finish.
pointing towards
I got the
any
floor.
one person.
I got the floor.
I meant Pottsgrove School District.
You said we should be leaders. Standing for what I believe, standing for what you believe, every one of you out there makes you a leader. Especially if you really believe what you're saying and it's not just BS. But I think it's reasonable to say right now, to show forward movement to the community and to say, given that things are improving, given the availability of masks, given the availability of vaccinations, our intention is, as of this date, whether that be 2 weeks from Monday, from last Monday, or a week from last Monday, I'm willing to negotiate that. If things continue as they are, or even remain as they are right now, we're willing to go mask optional. I know there's a lot of work being done right now from well-intended people trying to influence the decisions of the Montgomery Department of Health. I hope they're successful in that influence attempt. They are an honorable body. I still have respect for them. Given even that, I am willing to set that date and to say if things don't get worse, we're going to move. And to give enough time for school administration and for the people who are trying to influence others to get that work done. But at least it shows to us and to the community that we're thinking forward and not just remaining stagnant. I'd like to hear people react to that. I think it shows forward movement, it shows forward thinking. Some members of the audience may be annoyed that it's not now. Well, if I can help you with your annoyance, I will. I'm not ready to do it right now. But I am willing to say, given what's happening and given looking at things, here's a date in the future and we're going to do this. Let's explore the repercussions of that decision with the Department of Health. Let's explore the repercussions of that decision with the Department of Education and deal with it. But still stick to our guns and to move forward if conditions continue to go. So, I mean, that's where I am. And it's hard for me to only spend the weekend in Nashville, wore masks in the airport. Although some people wanted to fight with everybody else because the airport was asking them to wear masks. I wore masks on the plane. I didn't wear a mask in Blake Shelton's Old Red. I didn't wear a mask in the Ryman. So there's a real inconsistency here going on, even with myself personally. And yet I think when you look at the numbers, I think it is a reasonable move forward to say, as of this date, if things continue to improve or even stay the same on there, we will go mask optional. Reactions?
Do I have anybody other comments?
There we go. I'd just like to say that I think I kind of agree with Jay, but the echo was a little tough, so I wasn't catching everything you said. I'm moving forward. I'm looking ahead to getting to a mask optional point. I don't know that we're quite there yet. I'd hate to see us jump to a conclusion and then regret it. I know quite a few people in the medical community still believe that we should be wearing masks because it's just a little too soon to stop. And these are people that experience COVID every day, who are working in the COVID wards, and they see the death. They hold the hands. They're the ones holding the phones for people as they're dying so that they can say their last goodbyes, or the family can say their last goodbyes to them. I personally know people who have lost loved ones to COVID. It's not a joke. It's not a flu. There is nothing about COVID that is influenza. And to ever say that it doesn't affect children is completely wrong. The last time I checked, over 180,000 children in this country had lost their primary or secondary caregiver to COVID. Some lost both. So if you're going to tell me that this does not affect children, you're wrong. We need to continue to keep our community as safe as possible. Do I feel that maybe week, 2, 3 weeks, we can revisit and decide where we're going to go from there? Absolutely. Everyone's tired of wearing masks. Everyone's tired of COVID. You know, we all want life back to normal, 100%. I would just hate to see us jump the gun and do it a little too soon and have another loved one die or have long-term effects from it because somebody spread it to somebody else that otherwise wouldn't have had they been wearing a mask.
Do I have any other comments?
I have a question. Chuck brought up the point that what was being used as a definition of originally with alpha versus delta versus omicron versus pi versus what have you has changed. And I know, Dr. Finnerty, you'd said that the superintendents had brought that to Montgomery County Department of Health to say the severity has changed, will you look at these numbers and tell us, you are the experts, will you look at these numbers, Department of Health, and say, really, maybe moderate doesn't look like this and it looks more like, these numbers. Did that get anywhere?
It's an excellent question. We have had weekly meetings with folks from Montgomery County Office of Public Health, County Commissioner's Office, and also with CHOP, and basically posing exactly that question. These thresholds were created in the context of alpha and maybe the Delta variant when you think about it, but not the Omicron variant. So do the data suggest that they need to relook at it? So that's the question that we've posed to them, because they're not going to do something that's politically convenient for us, or because we want it, or because we're tired of masks. But if they have data to support that the threshold should be different, we want them to look at that and bring it back to us. We do anticipate that CDC is going to come maybe in the next couple of days with updated guidance. It's rumored to be about masks. I don't have an inside track to what CDC is going to say, but it is rumored to be about masks. Montgomery County Office of Public Health is generally quick to follow CDC guidance. So I think there could be relief there. I don't know, I don't want to promise that relief is going to come or what they're actually going to say. What I'm trafficking in rumors right now. So there's that piece. There is the possibility that we continue to decline. And the third piece, the level of community transmission is predicated on two things: incidence, which is the numbers, and that's what we've been using, or positivity. So the other option is that we could look at the or piece, the positivity rate, and if that's something that is palatable to the board, that's something that we could use to still tie ourselves to the guidance from Montgomery Office of Public Health, and it gives us two metrics of the level of disease in the community. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll go. With this is a tough one for me. As much as I want to move forward, I just feel sometimes, and I want everybody out there to know, we've been called all kinds of names. Know our hearts are in the right place. It is a very difficult situation we have been in. But for me, I really want to move forward, even if it's slower. I'm for personal choice. And I feel for the children, but I also respect everybody. You might not agree with what I feel, but there is a level of respect that we have to have. So for me, I'm ready to set a date, look at the options. Like you said, Dr. Finney, maybe in a week we might know more. But, my body's been compromised with cancer, so I'm at a different high risk. And but I just feel personal choice at this point, and I would like for us to visit it maybe next board meeting. But that's really how I feel.
Do we have any other comments?
Yeah, I agree that, well, first of all, I think we are moving forward. I mean, the threat is decreasing. And I think that I'm not comfortable with setting a date. That's a little too artificial. I would like to see different metrics, because I think that we are very close. We might even be there. We don't know, because we don't have reliable metrics. But to just pick a date makes me very nervous, because, and once we take the masks off, getting them back on is not going to be easy. So, it's just, the time doesn't work, but I bet you we can find a metric that does.
Any other comments?
I think I'm probably the only one who didn't go. I've been mask optional from the beginning, and I remain with that. So as soon as possible, as soon as we can possibly do it, I'm a yes for that. Am I too short for my microphone? I was saying yes, that I've been mask optional from the beginning, and that as soon as we can possibly do that, I'm a yes for the soonest possible date.
All right, so everybody's had a chance to speak, so my feel is that at this present time, right, we want to get to a point where we are mask optional. The community wants it, we want it, everybody wants it. We do sit in a different chair than everybody in the community, right? We have a responsibility, A, to the students and the children and the community. We also have a responsibility to our taxpayers to make sure that although everybody in the community will eventually pay because you're taxpayers, that if we were sued due to the ADA, other lawsuits, right, we would be at risk of spending resources that I would prefer to spend towards the children versus doing that. But what I hear is that maybe versus is that the metrics we're using is not the metrics we think we should be using. Maybe it's time to move up our timetable from moderate to substantial. We entered substantial today. If you went by the positivity rankings, and when the positivity, just so everybody knows, positivity is how many tests versus how many people are actually positive. In Montgomery County, as of today, it's 7.66, right, from my understanding. I'm not looking at it right now, so I don't know exactly, but I believe it's 7.66. That would put you in moderate, because their moderate at substantial was 8. So to me, it's below 8. That's moderate, right? I would like to see, before we say date, this is what we're going to do, right? Before we vote, because I'm never a person that likes to vote on a discussion. We have a piece of recommendation on board. What I'd like to say is the board is acceptable to it. I would like to vote yes on this with the recommendation to the administration. We would like to look at other numbers and see what we can do to get the mass optional on, if the numbers stay the same and the numbers show it, for our approval on March 8th. So that would give us, hopefully, 3 weeks, this week, 2 more weeks, that we would stay at the substantial rate where we're at. If we do use the positivity rate, and we look at that for the Montgomery County, and that does still stay at either moderate, substantial, or below, that we then have the opportunity to say masks are recommended. We're not saying mask optional, we're saying masks are recommended, but obviously that's not saying masks are mandated. Do I feel that the board would have support for that?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm saying the same thing that you're saying, but it would be this. My action would be to move to table the. Sorry, my action would be to move to table this till the next meeting.
Okay, I don't want to table.
I think that's the same thing.
I don't want to table because I want to let the volunteers in to help the students, and I want to be able to allow the course and stuff. I want to let them have that recommendation, so I don't want to table that. I'm just saying we don't put a motion on top of this one, that we give direction to the administration of what we said tonight, and let's see.
I'll accept
and we'd like
that.
to bring this up for a vote on March 8th. That'll give us 3 weeks of numbers. That'll also give us, I know, when Jay's voting tonight, I know Springford is talking about it tonight. I guarantee everybody else.
Springford adjourned after a minute.
After a minute?
Yeah, some chaos took place, and they didn't have a meeting, essentially.
Again, why you guys are the best. 1 minute, seriously.
They made it as long as Methacton.
It's ridiculous, right? But if everybody's in agreement, we were going to say yes to this, unless people were saying no with their vote. And we go to give the direction that we're going to vote on March 8th with a new recommendation of what we want. Is that accurate?
Can I just clarify the direction for administrative standpoint? So right now, our plan as written is only based on the level of incidence. That's the cases per 100,000, not the positivity. Is the direction of the board that we include the positivity, because it's an or relationship. If your incidence level reaches a threshold or the positivity level reaches the threshold, it would then change the category. So I want to be clear, is that something that you're directing me to include now? Is that something that we're going to vote on in 2 weeks?
So that's the question. Or you want to use the or? If you want to use the or, it gives us two options legally to offer mask recommended. Are you okay with giving us both options?
I'd like for us to switch to the or, to vote on that.
Yes.
Mark, is that, what do we have to do to add that? If it's the will of the board, what do we have to do to add that? Because it's not currently in the plan.
You're going to have to amend the plan and come back with it, and I think, I don't want to set policy of the board, only that seems to be a measured way to do it, so we have time to study it and understand what we're doing.
Well, let me be clear. If the will of the board is to try to amend that tonight, we can't, okay.
No.
You can, but I don't
No,
think
I don't want to amend it tonight. What I want to do is give you an opportunity to say, we want to look at both numbers.
Okay.
We want to get to the point where at substantial, we're still there, and give us the opportunity to find a way, following both the rules and the recommendations, so we can offer mask recommended to our families and district employees.
So again, just one other clarification. I'm sorry to do this, but I want to be clear on my direction. So say, for example, we continue the declines that we're making, and we have, the data always comes out on Tuesday. So the data comes out next Tuesday, and by incidence, we're not below moderate, but by positivity we are. And then the following Tuesday, so that would be 2 consecutive weeks where by positivity we would be in moderate, and that would be the night of our board meeting. So if we were going to vote on that on Tuesday, to then make that the health and safety plan, I would like to message parents between now and those 2 weeks to prepare that I'm going to be sharing the positivity rates as well, because that could indeed be the anchor that moves us to a different masking direction. Is that fair?
Is there any issues with that?
Okay. Not my direction.
All right, so what we're going to vote on tonight, though, is the current 7.5 as it stands we already know what direction we're given for March 8th. Everybody knows what we're given direction for March 8th. All right? Does anybody have any comments or questions as it stands now? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. We'll move to 8.1.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 8.1, which is the policy committee minutes.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the policy committee. Anybody have any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 8.2, operations. These are reports. We don't need motions for these. I need just a report from the operations. Dr. Nippert.
You're wrong. Thank you. The last operations meeting, which was on February 8th, the first item on the agenda was we talked about the budget. As it currently stands, the budget is a little over $1 million short. If we were to balance the budget with a tax increase today, it would require a 2.6% tax increase. The budget does not include any of the governor's proposal. That proposal came out the day we presented the budget. It is a pretty aggressive ask by the governor to fund public education at a historic amount. We won't know until closer to June 30th what the state winds up doing with the state budget. In the state's budget, it calls for minimum wage increase to $12 an hour effective July 1st, with 50-cent increases until about 2028. until it reaches $15 an hour. They're talking about reducing the corporate tax rate. They're talking about setting teacher minimum salary at $45,000 in the proposal. On the second item on the agenda, we talked about the use of the 2020-21 surplus, which you just recently voted on. The recommendation was to transfer to the Capital Reserve Fund to help pay for the building maintenance for the next 10 years. And the last item that we talked about at the meeting is we generated a report of significant changes of what we budgeted so far for this year and where we might end up at the end of the year. With the staff turnover, we are looking at now a $1.3 million addition to a surplus so far this year. And that was the conclusion of the meeting.
Anybody have any questions?
When is the governor's budget due?
He gave his last budget presentation on February 8th. That was his final presentation. Now, the next governor will have until March. The new incoming governor gets an additional month to present their budget. But, just like us, technically the state has until June 30th to pass their budget, but we've seen in the past where they've gone 9 months beyond the fiscal year to pass a budget.
This is sort of related to that. I was going to talk about this under new business, but it's kind of relevant now. The governor's budget was discussed at the Montgomery County Legislative Committee last week. This is kind of a negotiation. If you've ever bought a secondhand car, you know what's going on. The governor came in with an estimate up here. The Republican legislature came in with an estimate down here. They're going to meet somewhere in between. The discussion at the Legislative Committee is we don't know where they're going to meet. The governor's not going to get everything he asked for. The legislature isn't going to get all the cuts that it wants. But where they're going to meet is something that was not known at the committee and is going to be this is the 80-20 rule, only with the state legislature, you think of the 95-5 rule. 95% of the work gets done in 5% of the time because it's a rush at the end of the semester. So what's going to happen is literally unknown, especially because, and this gets into the political details, I don't know how much of getting in the weeds you want to hear, but the education chairman is retiring and is not running for re-election and so on and so forth. So that impacts the politics as well. So what's going to happen, we'll get something, but probably not as much as the governor projects.
Any other comments? Thank you, Dr. Nippert and Ron. Move on to report of the curriculum. Tina?
Thank you, Al. So we had our CIT meeting, and it's so hard to take an hour and a half of incredible information and condense it into just a few minutes. We had some community members come and join us, and it was so much fun. I love, it's such a privilege to serve on this committee, because you can sit down together and just really hear what the team is working on. And it's such a neat thing to be able to see what they're doing day in and day out. We talked about the assessment calendar and intervention data presentation. We talked about, I'm going to highlight because we have more in-depth coming. We did the data dashboard update, and we spoke on Ed Options Academy, and we adjourned. But without further ado, we have Mr. Voorhees. I believe he's going to really do justice to this entire presentation. And again, I wish we could have the whole hour and a half because it was just a lot of fun. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not going to take an hour and a half, I promise. But we do have pretty powerful data that we do want to share. One of the things that we talked about at our February 15th CIT meeting was about what we call our intervention data. So in our district, we follow an assessment calendar. And the purpose of that assessment calendar is to monitor students' achievement and growth at particular, I'll call them benchmarks throughout the year. And as a result of that, we can say, are students performing at the level they should? Are they making the growth that they should? And if they're not, what are we going to do about it? And if they are, how are we going to push them even further? So we use a variety of tools here in our district to assess our students. Tonight I'm going to focus really on grades 1 through 5, just to kind of highlight an example for you. And those tools, we use multiple tools because each of those tools tells us a little bit, sort of begins to tell a story, a different story about how our students are performing. We use the same assessments 3 times a year with the same cohorts of students, again, so that we can monitor their growth over time. At the building level, our teachers are using this information really at the classroom level to make instructional decisions about what they need to do in the classroom. At the building level, they review this data pretty frequently, and they establish teams and instructional targets for our students, and then they monitor students' growth toward those particular targets. At our district level, we like to monitor it because there are cut scores, we'll call them national norms, so we can see how students nationally are performing on the same same assessments at the same times of year that our students are having these assessments. So that brings me to what you see up on the screen right now. The 4 bars to your far left are from Diagnostic 1. The bars in the middle are from Diagnostic Tool. And this is specifically from a tool that we began implementing back in September. This tool is called ExactPath. What we really like about ExactPath is, although there's a diagnostic that goes along with it, it generates an automatic learning pathway for students. And that learning pathway is specific to what the student needs at that time. So in addition to what the classroom teacher is providing, the student can work online and receive instruction, receive practice, and then assess on that as well. So through the diagnostics, they also put various percentile rankings into place. So again, Diagnostic 1 occurred back in October timeframe, and Diagnostic 2 just completed last week. So if you're in each of those subsets there, if you're looking at the very light blue colored bars, those are students performing at the 0 to 24th percentile. So as I'm talking about this, these are end of year benchmarks, sort of what students should be meeting at the end of the year. This particular slide is looking at our students' performance in math. So you can see back in October, we had 656 students in grades 1 through 5 that were performing at the 0 to 25th percentile. Fast forward until February, that number is now 371 performing at that level. And we hope, and we're optimistic that come another several months, we're back to report that number being even much smaller. Excuse me. The opposite is also true. If we look at students in the 75th to 99th percentile, we had 30 students back in October. That number is now 4 times that at 127, okay? So as we looked at this information for math, we had the same conversation about what does it look like for our students in terms of reading. Ms. Breyer, are you able to forward to the next slide, please? Maybe. And as she's doing that, we are pleased to announce that the reading performance very much matches the math performance that we saw. And I don't have the particular numbers in front of me. Beautiful. Thank you, Ms. Breyer. So again, I'm not going to highlight each point, but again, exactly what I just described on the math is also true within reading in ExactPath. So again, there were 473 students in grades 1 through 5 performing at the 0 to 24th percentile back in October. That number is now 289, okay? And what you can see, our goal is to have the bars on the far right continue to raise and the bars on the far left to continue to go down. So that continues to be our goal as we move forward with this. The next question we had is the same story true as we look at multiple data measures? Because remember, I said we don't just use one particular assessment. We like to have various data points that collects that information very quickly and can paint a picture for us in terms of accuracy. Ms. Breyer, are you ready? You know, I heard just this morning, Ms. Breyer, that Vanna White was one of the highest paid women. There it is. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So another tool that we use is AimsWeb benchmark. And although the AimsWeb tool provides us with a variety of different assessments, one that we look at in particular is oral reading fluency. Our teachers generally agree pretty overwhelmingly that one of the things we want to keep our finger on the pulse of is the fluent reading behaviors of our students. So as we looked at this particular benchmark, if you're looking at it, it's a little difficult to see there, but there's two bars for each grade level. The maroon bar, the Pottsgrove maroon, is a fall benchmark, and at one grade level, and the black bench is the winter benchmark. And what you can see in each of those is an increase in terms of the overall score that students were scoring at that particular grade level. So again, what we were seeing in exact path data, we also reviewed against another assessment to look at that particular growth. So again, one of the things that we do at our Curriculum Integration and Technology Committee is continue to report on this information, report that out, and we hope to be back in another several months in front of you to share even better news about where our students are at the end of the school year. Mrs. McIntyre also talked about some additional pieces, including the data dashboard and our Ed Options Academy, which bolsters some opportunities for us within our virtual learning. So I'll turn over to Dr. Ramage to report on those pieces.
Thank you, Mrs. Breyer. That's great. You guys actually voted already on the Ed Insight portion, if you remember that, earlier in the agenda. And I know this slide isn't up there for readability. I just wanted to, in one slide, kind of show you some of the features. And those rows of dots, it's the top two rows. And if you would raise that slide just a little bit further, you'll see there's another sort of top two set. So these capabilities are really what we're adding to a system. It's not that we don't try to measure a student through multiple pieces of data. You as a board are probably familiar with ECRA. You've heard this before, and it's something we've used at a district level, but it's not really necessarily a teacher-friendly piece or a dynamic piece that can be pulled on more of a weekly or monthly basis. So this data dashboard will allow us to collect academic, attendance, as well as behavioral data. So this ties very well with both our 4.3 goal, which is to get a hold of this data dashboard and help teachers have pieces of data that they can use to quickly look at and adjust and inform their instructional decisions, as well as goal 3.3, which is about our MTSS, multiple tiered support system for students. So the dashboard actually crosses two of our district goals, and what you voted on tonight will allow us to begin that process with the company to begin to grab the 3 to 5 years worth of historic data, particularly academic and attendance data, which are housed in PowerSchool, and we'll work on the behavior piece, pulling as much of that as we can, but to begin to pull that into the system now, because that process will take some time as we work with the company as well as Montgomery County IU to get that automated process rolling. That's to prepare us for July and certainly the start of the next academic year, where then that will begin to populate automatically overnight. As soon as attendance records are entered by a teacher during the day, that will be pulled overnight. That's available the next morning for teachers to look at in terms of this dashboard. So there's some next steps. We're very excited about getting this moving in terms of a data dashboard. I've said it before, but it's sort of like what a dashboard on a car might do for you. You can go deeper by looking at customized reports, but in one glance, it's letting you know, how's my oil doing? What's my speed like? What's going on? Am I due for an oil change? What's popping up as indicators, and what kind of dynamic indicators are going on continually to help me do the best job as a driver? It's very similar to help us both as a classroom teacher, a building administrator, or a district administrator to get a sense of how it's going for our students and how we're moving them through. So that's Ed Insight is the name of the product. I'm going to switch over to the next piece, which was the last one that we talked about, which is another Ed Options. Now, this is not in place yet, but this relates to our Pottsgrove Virtual Academy, so this is goal 4.2. It's basically a big part of this goal hinges on cost saving for our current virtual students and hopefully winning back some of our cyber charter families. And BVA helps us in that regard, but we're excited about Ed Options as a way to expand, again, some of those possibilities for us as a district and those families. One of the things that it does is it allows some face-to-face weekly time. Now, I don't want to, this is still asynchronous, right? It's not, I'm in Ed Options, so at 10 o'clock I tune in and I take my Algebra 2 class. It's not that kind of instruction, but while they're doing asynchronous work, they'll have opportunities to sign up a couple times a week to be right in front of a teacher for instruction, not just office hours. So we're excited about that. The bar chart is, again, I'm hoping in one pretty striking visual to show you some of the benefits. So I checked with Mr. Linke. Mrs. Breyer, if you go up just a little bit, you'll see right underneath the chart, if you can raise that slightly, I don't know, this is really, oh, there we go. So on the left set of 3 bars is a regular ed student. The 14,440 represents the student allotment that would leave Pottsgrove. This is unique to Pottsgrove. It's not the same for every district. But that's what would leave the district when a student just enrolls in a cyber charter. Currently, you can see the bluish bar, I'll call it, of 4,360. That's what it would cost us for that regular ed full-time student at BVA. So we do, I know we're putting out money to send them there, but if I can indulge you, we're saving money, right, by not having that family move out to a fully, cyber charter, and that's what that 11,690, that's what that represents there in the bottom paragraph. A special ed student, it's even more striking because there it's over $34,471. I didn't put BVA on there because although we can send students out to BVA, they can't fully support the specially designed instruction of an IEP. It just depends what's in that IEP. Some students they can't support, many they cannot. Ed Options allows us to fully support those IEP students at a little higher cost of $7,000. So there you can see we would win back over $27,000. And I missed the big reveal there. I forgot on the first one, $2,750 is what it would cost for that full-time regular ed student. So we're even realizing savings further than what we've been doing with BVA. So again, we're excited about the possibilities. It gives us immediate benefits, both in expanding the services and reducing the cost. And they also offer opportunities to help us with some marketing, which may be attractive to some of our families that are currently out in full cyber charter situations that have never really been part of Pottsgrove School District. Hopefully we can turn some of those families back to the programs and co-curriculars that we have.
Before we let you go, Dr. Ramage, would you mind, with regard to Ed Insight, one of the things that was so impactful to the committee was when you shared how it could really save time for the teachers. There would be some things that they would not have to spend time doing that were more labor intensive, that this program would really benefit them. Do you mind touching on some of that?
Sure, yeah, that's a good point. Basically what it comes down to is we have teacher teams throughout the district, particularly K-5, where our MTSS program has been a little more established for a little longer time. They're doing a lot of hand entry of data. They may pull from standardized test data or some of the measures that you just saw, but they're moving that into a standalone spreadsheet for each student to compare it to some of the behavior data that comes out of another program we call SWIS. They're pulling it in from attendance data that comes from PowerSchool, but they're doing that with their own labor. It may be effective, but it's highly inefficient, I'll say it that way. And I appreciate the effort that they're putting through. But in a way, what Ed Insight will do, what the dashboard will do, is automate that process to a certain extent so that they can, instead of taking all that time, effort, energy to just get the stuff into a spreadsheet and then not having the time to examine or do the instructional planning, they'll be able to start much further along in that process. So the dialogue, the professional dialogue, can be not just about what was what was Dave's score on this measure? Let's drop that in there. It'll be there, and now they can talk about what's the best way to help Dave in math because he's struggling. So, yeah, I appreciate that reminder. We're looking forward to that as well. It's definitely a way to support our teachers and give them some of the tools that will help them support our students and families.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Boyce, also for sharing a portion of that presentation.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
I did want to add to this, to the people in the audience, and it's in my own level of understanding of what they're talking about, which isn't easy for me sometimes. But if you think about teaching, many times we as teachers or teachers themselves teach to a group of students. So I teach this subject matter to a group of 20 people. And I could say to myself, well, a bell-shaped curve says that 25% are going to get it, 50% are going to kind of get it, and 25% ain't going to get it. What if I could challenge that thinking and say what's stopping progress, what's stopping mastery for every student is the lack of an individualized approach to meeting the needs of what that student, what that boy, that young man or young woman needs in order to master that subject matter. And what if I could provide teachers with data individualized for each student based on their learning needs and saying, here's where you need to focus with this young man or this young woman in order to get them to achieve mastery? And what if we could teach teachers how to change from teaching collectively in a classroom to teaching an individualized approach with the same subject matter? So that I have different groups going on, moving around, people helping each other, working together to get mastery for all with recognition for the individualized needs. That's what this stuff is about. It was exciting. I mean, it took a while for me to understand that, but it changes the face of teaching. You may argue that elementaries kind of looked like that, but at least where I came from in secondary, it didn't. You either get it or you don't. What if we could help teachers learn what they need to know about each of the students they touch each day to say, if I change the way I do this, they're going to excel more? What would the results be of that kind of school? Now, they got fancy schmancy names for it. You heard this MTSS and other stuff, and it takes me a while to understand that. But what they're really saying is each individual is important. And if we can understand the needs of my 6 grandkids, of your son or your daughter, relative to the subject matter, and we can modify what we're doing, we can get them to excel. That's challenging. It changes the face of teaching to some degree. And what's interesting is one of the Dr. Smith, the new high school principal, endorses this approach. Big advocate of this approach. So you have a superintendent here who's hiring people that are consistent with the vision. And the vision is just simply empower every teacher so that they can reach in an individual way to help every child achieve mastery in the subject matter. Well, that's kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean, but think how difficult that is, too. And what Dr. Ramage was just talking about is data so that teachers don't have to sit down and interview every child, but data we can give to teachers that allow them to make decisions about what they need to do to better reach each individual that's in that class. Doesn't that sound cool? I mean, yeah, getting there it's not going to be easy. But those of you who manage, I don't want to applaud, I really don't. Those of you who manage or supervise others, play it out that way as a manager. You don't manage a group of 6 people. You manage a group of 6 individuals. Someone once said there is nothing so unequal as the equal treatment of unequals. Yeah? So what this is about is saying, hey, of these 20 kids I got, what are their individualized needs? Where are they different? And how can I modify what I as a teacher do to, bam, impact them much more than we've ever done? That's noble. That's noble. And we're not going to get there overnight, but that's the direction that this district is headed. I ask you to talk to your teachers about that approach. Ask them what they think. If you believe it, endorse it, support it. Because not all teacher colleges are teaching teachers to teach that way. And so for some people, you know what resistance feels like. I mean, we got it going on here. So there's going to be teachers who feel resistant. I've been teaching this way for 20 years. I teach a class. You don't teach a class, you teach 20 individual young men and young women. Yeah? Is that fairly represent where you're going?
Absolutely. And one of the things we did have, I do see some of the parents that were there. Committee meetings are great. They are, it's a great time to share out in a longer form what we're doing and to engage. So thank you for those that came, and they are posted on the website, and they are, you are welcome to attend.
Any other comments? All right, actually, I do have two, and I have to wait for, but I'm going to go different from all that stuff. That all sounded great. The two things I had a question on, obviously, are I saw the charts. I wasn't happy with this side of the chart, saying 600 and some kids were at 0 to 24. I understand it was a COVID issue and such like that, but I'm going to put you down and say that's your base. I want to see, I understand, I expect growth throughout the year. I understand it went from 30 to 127. I kind of expect that. So next year, I don't want to see 600 and some kids starting at the other thing. Second thing, we actually brought it up in policy because we were expecting to start talking about it, but I haven't heard yet from the committee that said personal finance is going to move so the policy committee can approve that. Is that something that the curriculum committee is going to be asking the policy committee to move forward with?
Yeah, that class is going to move forward. We are awaiting the course request at the high school because we heard the message loud and clear that we want to move forward with that class. And where we left it is we need the course requests to see how we're going to staff that. So course requests at the high school have been going in the last couple of weeks, and we expect to be able to present that in the March CIT and bring you an update shortly thereafter.
Thank you, but please make sure we get that to the policy committee because we can't change the graduation requirements without it.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to move on to personnel committee. Jay.
Thank you. Personnel committee, I'm pausing to think of the most recent meeting has been for the superintendent, for the principal of the high school. Dr. Finnerty has already said, I think, and I'm repeating, there were 3 rounds of interviews that were. The personnel committee reviews the process or what's being looked at here, and each of the rounds, within each of the rounds included were teachers, students, parents, board members in looking at candidates. In each of the rounds, you go from a larger number of candidates and keep narrowing it down until we got to the 3rd round, and there were 2 finalists. And Dr. Finney has already said what really worked well with the high school principal was a unanimous decision on the candidate we selected. You've already heard me say he is a big advocate of an individualized approach to education, even at the high school. I wish him the greatest of success in leading that change at the high school. It's not easy. I think, so I am proud of the process that was put in place. It worked. It had high involvement from all constituents. And we got a decision that was unanimous from all constituents, which also speaks well to the process in terms of that with the listening that went on. I think that's the only piece with the personnel committee is what you wanted, unless there's any questions here.
There was one other thing, Mr. Strunk.
Look at my screen.
Just documenting a change in the awarding of vacation days to get in line with other districts. At no cost to the district, we are now going to change how we award vacation days to new hires. Previously, we gave them no vacation days at all and forced them to take unpaid days, and then on their 366th day, boom, they got all the vacation days. We're going to give them vacation days up front, and in the rare circumstance they leave before they actually earn them, they will have to pay them back. So it helps us, it gets us in line with every other district and helps us be more competitive in attracting talent at no cost to the district.
Thank you. Before I go around for new business, we actually did have one new business I'm going to bring up that we talked about in policy committee. So in policy committee, I'm going to have Jay and Joe talk about something we had brought up. There was a question in regards to seeing the individual, we had removed, or we're in the process of removing the requirement of being here physically as a policy, so that you can possibly be, for whatever reason being, COVID hits again, emergency reasons, whatever it may be, that a board member would be virtual. The question that came up from the community was, hey, I'd like to be able to put a picture to the face. I would like to have the ability to see the school board director, even when they're virtual, for many, many reasons. And so the question was not really from policy, as into what would the board be interested and spend the resources needed to create an opportunity to somehow put something here, and so that you could see whoever is speaking on the virtual. So right now we can't see, all of us are here, but let's just say someone isn't here, and Bill, you're not here for whatever reason, he's on virtual, you can't see him, no one here can see him, and such like that. So that was the thought, but I'm going to leave this to Jay and Joe, because you guys were the ones that wanted to talk about it.
Can we just order
Well,
fat heads?
the idea came
just
from
put 'em
a
here?
the idea came from a community member. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you can tell me. Say again? Jeanette. Jeanette, thank you. I also don't hear well. It's 71-year-old ears. Jeanette said it would help her if a board member is not here in person, to at least have them to be able to see them virtually, so that she could see their nonverbal communication, their head nods, their smiles, how they respond to different things. I personally agreed with her. I think we as board members have a responsibility to be here. We have a responsibility to act responsibly when we're here in terms of listening and responding and things like that, and that may help do that. Now, the problem is hopefully it's not going to happen a lot, because I think if you're a board member, you should be here. However, if my grandson has another hockey tournament in Nashville, I may choose to be in Nashville again, which doesn't mean I don't love the school, it just means I love country music too. So there may be times when board members can't be here, and it would be beneficial to see them virtually. Because that only happens, it may not, hopefully it doesn't happen a lot. The question then becomes, do we have the technology to make that happen in a way that we can do it effectively, where you can see them and you can hear them? What does that cost, both in terms of time and dollars, and is that worth it in terms of that for what we get for the effort? So it's really an exploratory kind of stage, but that was the nature of the discussion. Speaking for my colleague Joe, he took it to another level and said he'd like to include everybody who's attending virtually, not just board members, but other people, and was quite passionate about that. I just saw starting with board members at least as a starting place to figure out if we could do what it is we're even trying to do. Do we have the capability, and is it worth the time and the effort for what we'd get from it? I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I'm good.
He says no, but he turned his mic on. So.
Yeah. No, everything that you just said is exactly correct. We want to see faces of a board member, and I even brought up maybe we need to even see the faces of the public, but it's something that we should investigate. I don't know how much money we want to spend to do that, but keep it to a minimum and we see what we can do. I think it's possible. So technology is great these days.
So the reason why I asked them to bring it to new business was I didn't have everybody here. So they're not asking for a motion. They're not asking for any kind of vote or anything like that. They just wanted to get like head nod directions if the majority of the board would like to get the idea of how much of the resources would need it, what would be necessary, what it would cost, what it would be to involved with possibly making it an option to do this. All I need to know is, does the board support looking into?
Yeah.
You have direction? Okay. Now I'm going to go around. Dr. Finnerty, you're up. Tina?
Nothing from me.
Patty?
Not today.
Jay?
Nothing, thank you.
Joe?
Nothing new at this time.
Dr. Nibbert?
Nothing, done.
Jim? Bill? Ashley? You want anything? I have nothing. I have nothing.
Can I
So
come
we'll
back
move
and-
on to the second
Al,
public comment. Oh,
Can I come
have
back
someone.
and change
I
my
got
mind?
Jay.
It's just, you may or may not be aware of the Western Montgomery Center for Technology, I got that wrong, Western Center, is having a open house on March 1. You can find that on their website. The work that's being done at the Western Center, I was just put on that board also. My sense is it's not known by a lot of people. They're taking some marvelous kids there who are interested in a field of study, and many of them have trouble sitting still for 40 minutes in a classroom and just working in that kind of modality. And there is I don't know what to call it, a stigma, I guess, to technical centers, even when I was young, which is hard to remember, that it's just all about grease and automobiles and things like that. If you've not visited the Western Center or the open house, or your kids don't know about it, I just really encourage you to take a look at what they're doing, because there's stuff there on sports medicine and on IT and on health, cosmetology, as well as auto shop and diesel kind of stuff. Just some marvelous, marvelous work being done. Their website for me was not as easy to navigate as the Pottsgrove website, but nevertheless, I got through it. I encourage you to look at their website, look at that date of March 1 for an open house, even if you're not interested. It's so got, I have 6 grandkids in this school here. 2 of them have applied to go there next year, and it won't hurt their academic standing if they choose to follow with college or something like that. So look at that March 1 date, and it's just a shout out to the work being done at the Western Center. We're one of 3 school districts who send students there, and they tend to go there for a half day and then come back and pick up their core subject matter at their sending school, their sending high school. During the rest of the day. Just marvelous, marvelous work. And here you have teachers who tended to be technicians first or specialists in their field who have picked up teacher certification. So it's just a whole different way of getting there, of looking at that. I just encourage you to look into it and look at the March 1 date and just go out and feel them out and say, would this help my son? Would this help my daughter? And just even ask them if they're aware of it, because it is, Patty is the chair of the board of the Western Center, and she refers to it many times as one of the best kept secrets of what's going on. No, I mean, getting people to know about it. So the March 1 date, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Jay. But one quick thing I wanted to say, if you can't find the website, we have a link on our website, so you can link right into that. But I actually missed my JOC report this month, so we'll double up next month. But thank you, Jay, for that.
Thank you. I would be remiss to not just mention, Springford, 1 minute. That's all they lasted, because they lasted 1 minute because they couldn't talk cordially about masking in there. We spent now 2 hours here, and we may not be moving as fast as everybody wants, but we're moving. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to public comment. I have 2, but I'm going to ask if anybody do we have anybody there for digitally first? All right, Ms. Clifton, I have you for SEL, correct? Come on up. Same as before.
Jeanette Clifton, Lower Pottsgrove. Okay, I agree with some of the things for social emotional learning, but disagree with others. And I just wanted to ask questions. I didn't really get to have a lot of questions because I was just given the website at the committee meeting. It's secondstep.org, and I understand that children need to learn about their emotions and how to handle them. That I agree with, totally. It's the part where it leads into racism and, all that CRT stuff, critical race theory. That's what I have issue with. And I want to know more about the exact plans that they're teaching the kids, because I don't want everybody to focus on somebody's color. It shouldn't be the color, it should be their character, just like Martin Luther King Jr. said, okay? I believe it is best to have discussions, finding common ground, and moving forward rather than backwards. Learn from the past, not to rewrite it, and move towards a better future. We are allowed to have different views and values. However, there are core beliefs we all share, and common decency is one of them. And I'm sorry if anybody thought I was attacking you personally. It's the policy I don't agree with, okay? I understand people are scared of COVID, but you have to make your own decision, and
10 seconds.
I just believe freedom of choice.
Thank you. Just so, real quick, I don't know, I don't want to clarify anything, but critical race theory, not in our curriculum, just so I don't get any emails. Mr. Corman, come on down.
Thank you, Board, for moving forward. A quick thank you to Joe and Dr. Nippert for your common sense comments tonight about masking. I am somewhat encouraged by that. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu recommends that you learn about your enemy. And on March 12th, March 12th, 2020, we were all hit with a hammer over the head by these wonderful folks from the World Economic Forum. This is a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. I highly recommend you dive into this, because the education space is going to be transformed if these people have their way over the next 10 to 15 years, to the point where, Mr. Linke, you may not need that $50 million to help improve the buildings and the operations, because school is going to end up online if these people have their way, and that's not good. That's not a good thing. In-person learning is super important. I know my son is thriving right now because he's been in person every single day this year, and there's a lot more to it than that, but I'm encouraged by those things. So take a look at this. I think it's important to know our enemy and see what we're getting into, because education is being transformed right before our eyes. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. One last time, anybody digital? Motion to adjourn.
Nice work, Dr. Leach.
All done. You guys will see you on March 8th.